How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado. And today, if you have been anywhere near headlines related to Denver, Colorado, you've seen the news. You've seen mortgage delinquencies are up. You've seen home sellers desperately unable to sell their houses and turning them into rentals. You've seen foreclosure filings ticking up across the Front Range. Put it all together, and it sounds like the floor is starting to crack under one of the hottest markets in the last decade. So today we're pulling every single one of these headlines and we're pulling them by the thread. What is actually true? What got stretched for clicks? What are the one or two things you genuinely need to keep an eye on if you're thinking about buying here or moving here? Because at the end of the day, knowing the difference between a headline and fact is crucial to any strategic move you're going to make. So we're starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett. So listen, there's two things we do here. One, we talk all things eating, breathing, living, experiencing the Denver Metro and Colorado Front Range. And as a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado, I'm helping people like you move here each and every day. So just know that the number and email on your screen, I'm always the person answering your calls, answer your texts, and answering those emails. So now let's really jump into what we're here for, and that is these headlines that have had Denver and Colorado associated with them, and really how people are overreacting, where we need to react, and where we genuinely need to put some perspective on them. So before we knock them in any way, let's state them fairly. So first headline came from a Denver news station recently. They ran a story in late May that headlined that Colorado has some of the highest mortgage delinquency growth in the country. That was the big headline there. Second one, a local property management company openly reporting a wave of owners who decided to pull their homes off of the sales market and instead turn them into rentals. That also being a big national story. And then third, foreclosure filings up year over year across Colorado and the Front Range. And that part is real, and we are not going to pretend otherwise as we dive into this. So the question for the next 10 to 15 minutes is pretty simple. Is Denver actually in trouble? Are we watching the floor fall apart on what has been, for the better part of 20 years, one of the hottest markets in all of Denver? Or are we seeing just headlines dressed up as disaster for clicks and attention? So the first headline we want to talk about is the delinquency rate, and really looking at the headline versus the fine print. Now, this is probably the scariest headline that we're going to see in this video, and I want to spend real time on it because it is a perfect example of how national reports get bolted onto a Denver specific concept, and it makes it scarier than it is, because in reality, the headline comes from Wallet Hub. It's a report that was comparing mortgage delinquency from the fourth quarter of 2025 to the first quarter of 2026. And here's the catch. That very same report mentioned multiple other states. It mentioned Vermont, Delaware, Louisiana, Florida, Montana. Colorado was not in the top five, not even in the top five of this particular report. In addition, this national study really was just, got a Colorado headline slapped on it by a local news agency because that's how they would get people to watch this story. In addition to this, Wallet Hub built this report on its own user data, not on the national mortgage system. So it was really only Wallet Hub's information that reported the fact that any of these states had an increased delinquency rate. Now listen, that doesn't mean that we ignore this completely, but let's zoom out a bit on this particular report, because two of the most respected sources in the business are telling the same story, and neither one of them in this instance are flashing red. So first, you have the ICE report that the national delinquency rate sits at about 3.35% in March of 2026. That's basically a normal seasonal level. It's only a hair above where it was a year earlier. For perspective, that same measurement peaked at above 12% back in 2010. So 3.5% or 3.35% compared to 12% back in 2010. A huge gap. And you are going to hear some headlines about FHA loans, certainly softer nationally. That is something that gets talked about. These delinquencies did climb to their highest levels since 2021. So again, to put things in perspective, we're comparing it to the last 5 years, not necessarily the great financial crash. So to me, that is the perspective, that these delinquency rates are climbing up towards normal levels, but that doesn't get headlines. If I say something is increasing to normal, that's pretty boring. But if I say it's the highest that we've seen in 5 years, that creates panic, that makes you click, maybe read the article. Now, the second headline is that foreclosures are on the rise. And this is, again, a national story that also got slapped with a Denver tag. And here is, I hate to say the honest, but here is the truthful breakdown of this. Foreclosure activity is genuinely up. And Colorado is one of the states where it's up the most on a percentage basis. Now, here's the key to this, and this is something that we have to take very seriously. Foreclosures are not a light thing. Even if there's only a handful of foreclosures, it's obviously a pretty serious situation to consider. So statistically, nationally, foreclosure filings in the first quarter of 2026 were up about 26% versus a year earlier. 26%. That is a pretty sizable number, and it's the type of number that is going to get attention. 26% is massive. Colorado was specifically called out as one of the handful of states where repossessions nearly doubled or more than doubled from 1 year ago. That was alongside Alabama, Washington, Oregon, and Florida. Again, big deal, doubling in foreclosures. And Colorado's so-called zombie foreclosure rate, that's pre-foreclosure homes that are sitting vacant, ticked up to around 3.8%, almost 4%. That was above the national average. So this all sounds like really bad news, and it's certainly not great news. However, again, let's frame this in real perspective, because there are two facts that change everything we see about these particular numbers. First, foreclosure activity is still running below where it was even before the pandemic. A big percentage jump off of a tiny number is still a small number. If you start from 0 and you go to 1, that's a 100% increase. And that's kind of the situation you have here. You have a small number becoming a slightly larger small number, but percentage-wise, it looks spooky. The second stat I want to bring up is that Colorado's overall home vacancy rate is about 0.9%, less than 1% of homes that are vacant. That's below the national average of 1.3%. A market drowning in distress does not have fewer empty homes than the average. So if Denver is in this huge doom and gloom situation, you would think that the vacancy rate of these homes would be above the national average, not roughly a half a percentage below that. Now, as we talk through all these things, some things are going to be macro, some micro. So who is actually being foreclosed upon? So it's not random, and it's not 2008. It is a very specific profile, and once you see it, you can, for the most part, avoid it. First, you have the squeeze. It's concentrated to buyers from roughly 2022, the summer of 2022 to 2024, who many of them were using temporary rate buydowns, and I implore you, look back at some of my old content when I mentioned how vulnerable some of those folks could become. You're talking about 2-year buydowns, 3-year buydowns. They used that to create affordability through the first couple years, and then that time frame ran out. Those buydowns are expiring, and the payment jumps to real levels. Now, this is again. This was something that was used to a lesser extent over the last couple years. Imagine this at scale is what caused a large part of your crash back in 2008, but under current times, these buydowns were used sparingly, and the people actually had to qualify for the highest payment. So again, you have some of the same factors that caused the crash, but at a much lower level. And these people are typically in situations where they put very little down, they didn't have a lot of cushion to go with that payment, so they have very little equity, they have very little room to maneuver. On top of that, so in this, add some Colorado-specific pressure. Talk about the fact that there's a ton of new construction buyers who bought on certain deals out in Aurora, Parker, these far-out suburbs. They bought with thin equity. They bought with sales pitches that, when they go to sale, can leave them vulnerable because there are properties in their own community that are worth less than their properties, that are on sale for less than their property should sell with better incentives than they can provide. And this is a payment structure problem. This is not a Denver problem. This is exactly the kind of thing a lender who tells you the truth upfront helps you from avoiding. And I'm not going to hide from that, because that is something that I can respectfully say I've stood on from the beginning. And the third big headline is, oh my gosh, all these people in Denver, they can't sell their homes. They're so desperate. So they're turning their homes into rentals. They're becoming landlords against their will. It's such a tragedy. And listen, there are going to be some examples of people who are in a tough spot and have to turn their house into a rental. But overall, owners are pulling their listings and they're turning them into rentals instead of selling them. And it's mostly a calculator decision. It's not a panic decision. It's looking at, we could sell this house, this is how much we could make off of it. Man, that really doesn't seem like a good deal for us. We can rent this property, we can cash flow with even decent rent. That is a better option for the time frame. So you have these property managers across Denver who are confirming the trend. That you have these sellers who got lackluster offers, and so they're taking this as a sign. They're just gonna take the sign down from selling, they're gonna relist the property as a rental. Some of the key factors here. Property taxes jumped hard after a 2023 assessment here in Denver. So some owners saw an increase of 20% or more on their property taxes. Insurance premiums keep climbing. That keeps pushing people's payment higher. They may have a fixed rate on their mortgage, but taxes and insurance pushing things higher. And the sales market in general has softened. So prices that they hoped for in 2022 is just not the same price that they're getting in 2026. And so what does an intelligent person do? Well, they sit down and they do the math and they see this is what we could sell the house for and this is what we could clear. Or if we turn this into a rental, here is what we could make off of the rent. Here is the amount that could carry our costs, that could pay the mortgage, that could pay these taxes, and then we could wait for a better selling window. So a lot of sellers are turning into landlords because they've decided that it's worthwhile to explore, can we rent this property long enough to let the market pick back up, even if that is multiple years down the road. And this is the fact that you cannot choose to turn your home into a rental if you're underwater on it, if you're desperate, if you have no other option. If you have to sell your house, you have to sell your house. The fact that so many of these owners are able to make a logical decision, look at the math, and decide that they want to turn their house into a rental is a sign of strength, it's a sign of equity, it's a sign of affordability. It is the farthest thing from desperation you could ask for at any point. Now, is every single person turning this sale into a rental a happy choice? No. Some are absolutely reluctant by it. Some are going to struggle to be landlords. It's not always an easy thing, and this comes from somebody who owns multiple properties and manages them themselves. But for the most part, it is at least a good option. There's at least opportunity there for them. But I'll tell you, the idea of somebody being able to say, you know what, I'd rather wait to sell my house rather than, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose everything is a huge gap. And listen, while I do not make a living off of people renting homes or moving here to rent, this has been fantastic news for the rental market in Denver. And the rental market in Denver, when you talk about the pandemic, 2020, 2021, rents were out of control, just like everything else. It was very hard to find affordable housing. That, certainly hasn't been solved in Denver, but you have seen a softening of the Denver rental market. And so out of this, here's the Denver story from this exact same stretch of time that somehow never got, the scary treatment as far as headlines. And that is, if you were moving here and renting first, you were walking into the best deal renters have seen in more than a decade. But somehow that's not the story. Everything is doom and gloom. So let me be straight with you of why I'm even bringing this up. Because as I mentioned in the first place, I'm a mortgage lender. I do not make a living. I don't make a single dollar off of somebody moving here and renting. And I will say with full disclosure here, I can't really help people who are renting. I can tell you about neighborhoods, but I can't tell you about buildings. So why would I talk about this? Because I believe in this city and I believe in the future of this city. And I want to encourage people who are interested in moving to Denver to explore it. And if moving here to rent is advisable and strategic for you, it's a pretty solid time to look at Denver as far as rents. Here's the stats. Denver apartment vacancy hit its lowest level in about 16 years. Landlords have had far more empty units to fill than they are used to. I can tell you from my own properties, over the last couple years, the rents that I am able to charge on these units has decreased. That is something that I would not have said a couple years ago. It had been nothing but a pretty steady climb. Instead, it has retreated. Average apartment rents have come down year over over a year and are sitting near their lowest level since 2022. So you have 4 years where apartment prices have basically leveled off to where they were 4 years ago. That is massive. The reason is not some Denver collapse. That's something I want to be very clear about. It is the opposite. Denver actually overbuilt apartments. We had all these people moving here. You had roughly 19 to 20,000 new units that were, unloaded or landed in 2024 alone. That's nearly double the normal pace. And so you have a lot of landlords competing with each other. You have a lot of opportunity for different people, whether they're looking at houses, townhomes, apartments, you name it. And Denver is actually leading the nation in concessions that people are getting from apartments, whether you're getting your first month or second month or a lower rent amount. I've talked to folks who were getting ready to move out of their apartment and the landlords or the property manager came to them and said, hey, I will reduce your rent by this much if you stay. So rental opportunities have certainly been improving here in Denver. Now, a quick caveat to move on to the next topic is I don't know if this is something that will last for an extended period of time. The reason I say that is because new apartment construction has slowed to its lowest levels in years. This means that there's going to be a glut that gets absorbed by rents. It's going to get absorbed as this inventory ticks down. That could take some time, but you had a lot of apartments come to market. That's going to slow down over the years. Everything levels out, everything corrects. So this is good for the rental market. How long it lasts is yet to be seen. All right, so quickly, what is the Denver market actually doing? Let's talk about that very quickly. We're going to go off of April 2026 data. That's the most recent as of the making of this video. So first, you have the median sales price across the metro sitting at around $605,000. That's essentially flat compared to same time frame in 2025. I said for a long time, Denver is in the midst of a long-term correction where home prices are not increasing. Some will argue they're decreasing, and there is some truth to that. They're just not decreasing drastically. But overall, you have a market where if somebody doesn't buy today and waits a year, the market isn't getting farther away from them the way it used to. It used to be if you waited to buy a house, you were going to be tens of thousands of dollars behind that same house. Right now, not the case. Active listings jumped to roughly 11,500 homes. That's up about 17%. This is a real shift. Again, this is more choices. At the end of the day, that's what that statistic means. More houses being on the market means more choices for buyers, more opportunities for buyers. Now, one interesting caveat here is that homes are still, especially those who are priced well or that are priced well, are still selling or getting under contract in roughly 2 weeks. So you don't have a lot of inventory that's still setting. It's not flying off the shelves, but if it's priced right, it's still selling. And so again, I hate to beat a dead drum, but these are all stats. This is all information that does not suggest a crash. You don't have prices tumbling. You don't have homes sitting, if they are priced correctly and they look good, you don't have homes sitting for months and months and months. That is, again, the opposite of a crash. And for those of you who would push, there is a huge reason why this is not 2008. And I want to make sure people very much understand this if you don't already. In 2008, millions of people owed more on their homes than their home was worth. Millions of people. And so when prices dipped, these people did not have any breathing room. They had no cushion. They had no options. Foreclosure was the only route they could go, or a short sale where you sell your house and the bank accepts less than it's worth. But otherwise, foreclosure was the answer. Today is the opposite. The average US homeowner sits on roughly $300,000 of equity. Now, granted, that's average. You have people who have millions of dollars in equity on their homes, so that number is going to be off. But the fact is, the vast majority of homeowners have a solid amount of equity on their homes. Tens of millions of homes in this country are paid off free and clear. The only thing that people are paying is insurance, HOAs, taxes. That's it. There are no mortgages, no foreclosures on those. So equity is a shock absorber. At the end of the day, that's what equity tends to do in a tough market. It means that a struggling homeowner can sell, they can refinance later, they can rent the place out instead of handing the keys to the bank. They have more options because they have equity and they're sitting, many of them, at a lower rate and a lower payment. There is some level of flexibility. So when someone starts talking about, delinquencies are up and foreclosures are up, and they start whispering about 2008, that's when, at least right now, you have to roll your eyes at it. because they just don't understand the scale that was required for the market to do what it did in 2008 and compared to what this market in 2026, the foundation that it rests on. Now, who should actually be concerned? Let's cover this. I shouldn't say quickly, but let's make sure that people who should be concerned are aware, because I'm not in the business of telling you everything is fine. I'm not in the business of telling you that nobody should worry, that everything is just perfect. Because at the end of the day, if I only told you the comforting half of the story, I wouldn't be doing my job. So who should be concerned? If you bought in 2022 to 2024 and you had a temporary buy down and you had a small down payment and that buy down is getting ready to expire, I need you to run your real payment. I need you to, if you're not aware of it, and a lot of people who are on these temporary buy downs don't seem to be, because you get used to seeing a smaller number. Be aware of that full payment before it surprises you. Talk to your lender before you get to that position, before it is too late. There might not be anything that you can do about it, but at least be aware of what that payment is going to look like. If you're a brand new construction buyer and you're in a far suburb and you have thin equity and you have the least room if you need to sell, know your number. Be aware of where you are buying this house. If you're a military member, if you're in a relocation situation that could force a sale on short notice, if you're not certain how long you're going to be somewhere, that might not be the opportunity to buy. Or if you already have, again, staying in contact with people, aware of your numbers if you don't have 100% control over where you live. And I deal with this with a lot of military families. So the bottom line is this: are the headlines accurate? Sure, they're not lying. None of these headlines are false, but many of them exaggerated, many of them worded in a specific way to gain more attention. That is absolutely true. Are some of them something, or all of them for that matter, something we should take seriously? Because we can be aware of these numbers, we can put them in perspective, we can still take them seriously. So let me land this plane, if I may. So first, what we're taking seriously: foreclosures, delinquencies are on the rise. Yes, we need to take that seriously. We need to be aware of that. That there are a specific slice of recent buyers who are feeling real pressure. Yes, 100% something we need to be aware of. The key here is to not blow any of this out of proportion. That rise is off of historic lows. It is still below pre-pandemic levels, and the Delinquency Colorado headline was a national story wearing a Denver costume at best. And flatly false, as we will continue to say, is that Denver is crashing. And anybody, hey, Nick Gurley, who will get a lot more views on his YouTube videos than I will, this idea that Denver is crashing. At the end of the day, flat prices, rising inventory, 2-week sale times, record equity, that is not a crash. That is not what a crash looks like. At the end of the day, if anything, more inventory and less competition, that makes for friendly windows for serious buyers. It has helped people in the rental market. It has helped more people live and experience Colorado than they've been able to in decades. So if you're thinking about making a move to Colorado, whether it is renting, whether it is buying, look, first and foremost, run the real numbers, talk to somebody who knows them. And as always, I am happy to be a resource for you in any way, shape, or form I can. My number and email on the screen. Always know that I'm the person, answer your calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. There, winning if you need me. That has been the truth about the Denver headlines. Is Denver really in trouble? Until I see you next time, peace.